Hello and welcome. Hope your week's off to a great start. I'm Daniel Che for Arirang News. Let's start with the headlines. Ruling Second Party lawmakers loyal to the president continue to urge their floor leader to step down for conceding to the main opposition party's demand to revise a controversial parliamentary law when the president was firmly against it. Greece's request for an extension of its bailout program is rejected by its creditors. Fearing the worst, Greeks rush to ATMs to withdraw their savings as banks are set to close. 13 years have passed since courageous South Korean sailors fought off two North Korean ships that crossed the NLL to honor the servicemen who died in the line of duty. A commemorative ceremony attended by the defense minister is held. The ruling Second Party's top negotiator is on the verge of a leadership crisis. Floor leader Yoo Seung-min is under intense pressure to step down in order to ease tensions with President Park Geun-hye and figures within the party who are loyal to her. Kim Young-gil starts us off.
The internal feud within the ruling Second Party over a controversial National Assembly law that was vetoed by the president last week is deepening. At the center of it all is the party's floor leader, Yoo Seung-min, who worked with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party to negotiate a deal that he knew the presidential office opposed. Under the deal, Yoo conceded to the MPAD's demand to revise the parliamentary law as a precondition to passing another bill to reform the debt-ridden pension system for government employees. Second Party lawmakers who are loyal to President Park continue to urge Yoo to resign from his post for creating the current tensions between the president and the governing party.
I believe floor leader Yoo Seung-min will make a wise decision for our party.
The party says it's hoping to hold a general meeting of its lawmakers to decide whether Yoo should remain in the job. Meanwhile, the MPAD continues to blast the ruling party for bowing to the president's wishes. The party is also critical of President Park for pressuring Yoo to give up his post, emphasizing that the revisions to the parliamentary law were passed by lawmakers from both parties.
President Park Geun-hye's pressure on the ruling party floor leader to step down is itself unconstitutional behavior that encroaches on the National Assembly's rights and the separation of powers.
The MPAD is threatening to continue its boycott of all parliamentary sessions if the veto law isn't put up for a revote. Korea's constitution allows bills vetoed by the president to be resubmitted for a vote, or the bill will be scrapped. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye, who took direct aim at the embattled floor leader before vetoing the disputed parliamentary bill last week, instead focused on boosting the economy at a meeting of her senior secretaries earlier today. Some analysts say it's the president's way of showing she will continue to manage state affairs and look after people's livelihoods despite the political disorder at the National Assembly. For more, we turn to our Choi Yu-sun.
Giving the domestic economy a shot in the arm, especially as the country deals with the economic impact of the MERS outbreak, was the main focus of Monday's secretaries meeting led by President Park Geun-hye.
우리 경제를 정상 성장 궤도로 하루빨리 복귀시키고 또 소비를 비롯해서 일상적 경제 활동이 제자리를 찾을 수 있도록 과감한 소비 진작 대책을 마련해야 하겠습니다.
Referring to the government's recently announced economic revitalization and reform policies for the latter half of this year, President Park stressed that time is of the essence in executing them.
타이밍을 놓치게 되면 돈은 돈대로, 재정은 재정대로 들어가면서 효과는 못 내기 때문에 결국 빚더미에 앉는 결과가 될 수밖에 없습니다.
The president also highlighted the business community's role in the economic revival efforts, saying businesses should fulfill their investment commitments and strive to spur domestic demand. Making no reference to the political upheaval amid disputed revisions to the National Assembly law, President Park, in a likely display of her commitment to revitalizing the economy, urged officials to speed up deregulation efforts to encourage both investment and job creation. She talked about removing regulations that have a greater ripple effect first and ensuring regulatory reforms are felt at every turn in society. The president also called for a progress checkup on the administration's annual tasks halfway through the year to make sure the outcome by the year's end will meet the target objectives. 최유선, Arirang News.
Greece's day in the eurozone and possibly the European Union could be numbered as the debt crisis has taken yet another turn for the worse. With its international creditors closing the door to a bailout extension, the Greek Prime Minister has confirmed that banks will be shut on Monday and capital controls imposed. Our Han Da-eun tells us more.
Greece's nightmare is fast becoming reality after its creditors, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, rejected the troubled nation's request for an extension of its bailout program. As multiple sets of debt repayment due dates draw ever closer and with no money by which to pay them, Greeks have been rushing to ATMs to withdraw their savings, fearing the worst after Parliament's surprise referendum call on the creditors' take-it-or-leave-it bailout terms. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has announced that banks will be shut on Monday while capital controls will be imposed. The country's stock exchange will also be closed on Monday.
This decision led the European Central Bank today to limit the liquidity of Greek banks and force the Central Bank of Greece to suggest a bank holiday and a restriction on bank withdrawals.
With the announcement, Greeks will have a cash withdrawal limit of about $66 per day, while payments and transfers abroad will be prohibited. Banks will reportedly close at least until July 6th, a day after the referendum. Greece is facing a $1.7 billion repayment to the IMF that's due Tuesday and a nearly $3.9 billion repayment to the ECB on July 20th. Greece's woes have raised the possibility of a so-called Grexit from the euro, sparking declines in Asian stocks. In Korea, the benchmark Kospi dropped 30 points to close down at 2060 on Monday, while the Kosdaq tumbled 2%. The country's finance ministry has raised the Greece surveillance level up one notch and formed a task force focused exclusively on the Greece fallout. But officials also said that Seoul has been preparing for the worst-case scenario, so the impact will likely be smaller than it might have been 4 years ago when fears of a Grexit were raised for the first time. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
In stark contrast to the conditions in Greece, China is in a festive mode as the country celebrates a milestone in its foreign policy today, as member nations sign a formal charter for the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in Beijing. The organization will begin operations early next year. Our Shin Se-min has this report.
Korea is chipping in a total of over $3.7 billion of paid-in capital to the China-led Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank through 2019. Korea, the fifth largest shareholder among the 57 founding member nations, has vowed active cooperation with the bank.
Korea's participation in the AIIB will help create business opportunities in the construction, communication, and IT infrastructure sectors.
The AIIB will start with $100 billion in authorized capital, $3.7 billion of which is being contributed by Korea. Korea has a nearly 4% stake in the bank, coming after China's 30% and India, Russia, and Germany. It's the largest share Korea has ever had in any global financial organization, including the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank.
The large share will help local companies expand their businesses into third countries, using some of the world's top infrastructure skills.
He added, however, that more negotiations are needed as Korea is aiming to secure a standing manager post or win one of the vice governor slots to improve the opportunities for Korean companies. Yet, questions over the infrastructure of the bank remain. Despite the hope that Korea, along with other member nations, will have a say in decision-making process, worries persist over the transparency of the AIIB as China could try to exploit its power in raising its economic and geopolitical influence within the region. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
While there's lingering economic uncertainties around the world, Korea's economic growth over the past decade has remained relatively strong in comparison to that of other OECD member countries. Our Son Jung-in tells us more.
Korea came in at 6th place out of 34 member countries in terms of economic growth rate, growing at an average of 3.7% per year during the period between 2005 and 2014, according to data released by the OECD on Monday. That's 2.5 times higher than the OECD average of 1.5%. Chile ranked first on the list with an average annual expansion of 4.2% during the same period, followed by Turkey, Israel, Poland, and Slovakia. Australia and Mexico came behind Korea in 7th and 8th places, respectively. The latest figure for Korea represents an outstanding performance for the country when compared to countries with a per capita GDP exceeding $30,000. The top 6 countries on the list, with the exception of Korea and Israel, all had a per capita GDP in the $20,000 range. Also, unlike many OECD members that suffered a period of weak or negative growth right after the 2008 global financial crisis, Korea remained relatively stable. Korea recorded the lowest fall among the top 6 countries on the list from 2009 to 2014. Financial experts say now it's time for Korea to come up with a new economic policy while simultaneously pushing for structural reforms as the period of rapid economic growth for the country has come to an end. 손정인, Arirang News.
We shift our focus to the latest regarding the outbreak of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, situation here in Korea. The Korean government seems to be getting a grasp on the situation as no new cases have been reported for the last 2 days. On top of that, there's good news about the first person diagnosed with MERS in Korea. Our Kim Yeon-bin gives us the updates.
Korea's first MERS patient has made a full recovery. The National Medical Center said Monday that patient number 1 is scheduled to come out of isolation on Monday after several genetic tests for the disease came out negative. The center added, however, that her health has deteriorated and she will have to go through rehabilitation. In addition to that bit of good news, no new cases were reported for a second consecutive day on Monday, for the first time in over a month. Health officials say this may be an indication that the outbreak may be on the wane. The number of people diagnosed with the disease is holding steady at 182, and the death toll also remains unchanged. Of those who have been diagnosed, 57 people remain hospitalized, with 14 currently in critical condition. The remaining 93 have been discharged from hospitals after making complete recoveries. Since the country reported its first MERS case in May, roughly 16,000 people have been subject to quarantine or isolation. Over 13,000 have been released so far, as they showed no signs of MERS after the incubation period, which is 14 days. There were still nearly 2,700 people in isolation for possible infection as of Monday, up by more than 100 from the previous day. Despite the suspected decrease in the number of MERS cases, officials are still keeping a close eye on Samsung Medical Center and Gangdong Sacred Heart Hospital, as both are seen as the epicenter of the disease. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
In other news, the South Korean Navy held a commemorative event this Monday, marking the 13th anniversary of the Second Yeonpyeong Sea Battle between the two Koreas. It left 6 South Korean sailors dead and 19 others injured, although we were victorious, according to the defense minister. The defense minister Han Min-gu, who was attending the ceremony for the first time, vowed retaliation against North Korean provocations. Our Connie Kim files us this report.
It was around 10:20 a.m. on June 29, 2002, when a deadly naval clash between the two Koreas in the West Sea left an indelible mark on Korean history. 2 North Korean patrol boats crossed the northern limit line, the de facto maritime border in the West Sea, and fired artillery rounds near the border island of Yeonpyeong. The clash ended about 30 minutes later when a North Korean patrol ship withdrew in flames. 6 South Korean sailors were left dead and 19 wounded. 13 years later, the soldiers' final sacrifices have still not been forgotten. They were honored again this year at a ceremony hosted by the Navy Chief of Staff and attended by roughly 700 people, including families of the victims and government officials. Defense Minister Han Min-gu, who was attending the ceremony for the first time, sent a strong message of warning to North Korea.
The Second Battle of Yeonpyeong was a victory of our military against North Korean provocations. It's a proud history that depicts our will to keep North Korean forces from capturing our territory.
He then read out the names of the 6 fallen soldiers, calling them heroes who defended South Korea from the enemy. The government is currently pushing to promote the 6 soldiers from martyrs to duty to war dead in response to criticism that the soldiers' achievements have not been fully acknowledged. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A South Korean civilian group will visit North Korea on Tuesday to discuss the details of a planned trip there by the widow of former late President Kim Dae-jung. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Monday that it approved 5 representatives from the Kim Dae-jung Peace Center to travel to the North Korean border city of Kaesong. Former South Korean First Lady Lee Hee-ho is seeking to visit North Korea as early as next month. During a meeting with Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won, Lee expressed hopes that her trip could pave the way for easing tensions on the Korean peninsula. The former First Lady has been seeking to visit the North to provide North Korean children with hand-knit hats, scarves, and clothes. The second hearing in a multi-billion-dollar international lawsuit filed by the U.S. private equity firm Lone Star against the Korean government resumes in Washington today. The International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes reported that the 2 sides are scheduled to meet back in court on Monday. The session will proceed for 10 days and will focus on whether the Korean government's taxation on Lone Star was fair. Lone Star filed a $4.7 billion case against the Korean government in late 2012, claiming it was forced to pay unfair taxes in addition to losing profits in its asset sell-offs in Korea. That's it for me. Thank you for watching. Join us at 10 p.m. Korea time for more.